So I debated about making this video because the topic isn't sexy. It's not zeitgeisty, it's not currently in the news. And I wondered, is there actually anything I can add to all the things that have already been said? But that was until I read this book. And I realised there's loads of stuff I don't actually know about friendship. And if I don't know it, maybe you don't know it. For example, did you know that a lack of social interaction can be as bad for you as smoking 15 cigarettes a day? Doesn't that fact just want to make you take up smoking? But also, a 2010 study conducted by Brigham Young University found a 50% increase in likelihood of survival for people with stronger social relationships, even after accounting for disparities in age, sex, health, and cause of death. So today's video is a life or death topic, my friends. I have been making friends, breaking friends, fucking up friendships, and making friendships that turn into something that feels more like family for the whole of my 33 years on this earth. And I wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that I had from reading this book, and also some probably semi-original thoughts from my brain. Who am I kidding? Everybody's thought of every thought ever before. But these are the ones that have come to me because they've rung true with my experiences, and I wonder if they might be useful. There's only one way to find out. The constant struggle of wanting to go far enough into the woods so you don't come across dog walkers, but not so far in that when you get murdered by somebody lurking in the woods, it won't take too long for the police to find your body and therefore minimise the amount of anguish your parents go through. Just girly things. Anyway, I don't wish to paint myself as a saint or a martyr. I'm sure there's people who have endured my messy style of friendship in the past, especially when I was younger. But I do think I am somebody that has absorbed patiently some very strange behaviour from friends. And up until reading this book, I thought the only impact that would have would be on me. Not negligible, but also I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm the only person enduring the impact, right? Well, there's this part in the book where Elizabeth Day is on a walk with one of her friends, and she's talking about another friend she's been trying to stay distant from and set boundaries with because essentially they're kind of using her, and she's considering going back to that friendship and trying again. And the friend that she's walking with really puts his foot down in a way that neither she nor I was expecting. This is why you thinking about letting Becca back into your life worries me, he said. It's a clear case where something should end. You're setting parameters for your other friends. You're saying to your friends, I really value friendship. It's a rare and beautiful thing to me. But if you're going to be friends with Becca, it makes me think, oh my God, she will literally be friends with anyone. Harsh words from Satnam. But she goes on to reflect on it and she says, if I let Becca back into my life, I wouldn't be as good a friend to Satnam. I would have less time for him, yes, but it was more than that. Emotional resources can be finite too. My relationship with him would carry less weight because how can he trust me if, in my desperation to accumulate friends and never let them go, I spread my love so thinly and allow myself to be treated so badly with so few boundaries that the act of my friendship itself carried no meaning. I'm just going to let you sit with that one for a second. Should we all just sit with that? I do think as a viewer, I have romanticised the types of friendships on screen, like beaches and why can't I think of any other examples? Friends, where people are friends throughout their whole life, to the detriment sometimes not only of myself, but the person I'm trying to have a friendship with. Me saying that friendships are really important and vital to me, to my very, very good friends, and then going into friendships where I let myself be treated very badly and then let them bear the brunt of it is, on reflection, a little silly. And it makes me think a lot about my occasionally poor communication skills when it comes to my own feelings of how I'd like to be treated, and just generally the relationship between care and compassion and boundaries, which is ever complicated, but I definitely think reading those 2 pages helped me clarify some stuff. The second one is, it turns out class really matters. Not so much in my teenage years. I think a lot of people tend to be surrounded by other people in a similar class bracket to them growing up. It seemed to matter a lot as I got into my 20s, especially in my mid-20s. And I thought, honestly, naively, it would stop mattering as much in my 30s. But I've come to realise that I think it matters more than ever. Not just from my own conversations, but from the experiences of lots of my friends. I know the kind of class tensions that come with ending up in completely different financial situations can really have an impact on friendships if we're not open about it and we don't talk about it. In Billy No Mates, How I Realised Men Have a Friendship Problem by Dickins, he talks a lot about how as we get older, we have less time than ever, especially in the modern age where lots of people are working way more hours than they should be, frankly. We're also much more interested in consuming lots and lots of mass media. So we're inside doing that a lot more, and we're also way more geographically mobile. We're constantly moving because we're renting for longer and longer and longer, and the house prices keep going up and up and up. Catherine made a really interesting video about the feeling of wanting to live near your friends, and I had loads of complicated feelings about it. We had a really interesting discussion in the Gumption Club about the reality of being able to live near your friends when your incomes are different or your needs are different, your geographical loyalties lie in different places. If you see my video about leaving London, you know I have loads of complicated feelings about realizing you can't logistically give yourself a good life in the place where you thought you were building a life and where your friends are able to, but realizing you have the chance to give yourself a good life elsewhere whilst losing that security of proximity to a social circle that is really important to you. But what I am grateful for is that I've never felt any kind of competitiveness with friendships. Competitiveness is something that's discussed in Billy No Mates in the way I hadn't really thought about, the like kind of inherent socialized competitiveness of male friendship, which frankly sounds horrifying. There's one interview that really stuck with me of a man who said he really loved being in the men's choir, not because he's really into singing or particularly into music, but it's the only way he's found to be able to spend time with other men in a non-competitive way. And he's right, a lot of men have been socialized to want to do activities together, like it's very activity based, and as you get older those activities become more and more expensive. They're not just like kicking around a football on a spare piece of tarmac in your neighborhood. They're getting football season tickets, going out on expensive holidays, drinking a lot of alcohol, quad biking. Do men quad bike? What do men do? I don't even know. But I think it is relevant for all genders of like the expense of friendship as we get older. I found it really expensive to socialise in London because I never lived in the same borough as my friends. So I would always end up going into London and purchasing food and drink and other activities which are astronomically priced in a capital city. And as a lot of us progressively live in countries where free public space is being shrunk and shrunk, I have to ask the question, is it becoming unaffordable to have friends? Oh God. Dickins talks about Robert Putnam's now classic Bowling Alone. He uses reams of data to tell a depressing story. Since the 1960s, there has been a dramatic decline in social capital. Civic engagement and organisational involvement have collapsed, with major falls in church attendance, union membership and participation in community-based groups. In other words, we've withdrawn from our traditional sources of social connection, which really reminded me of this interview I did that I'll link below with this author called Klinenberg. He wrote this book called Palaces for the People about the lack of spaces outside of our own houses that are free to hang out and connect with people in. And from a social perspective, it sounds really dangerous because it hinders friendships outside of your class boundary, surely. And without friendships outside of your class boundary, how are we going to sort all the shit out? I think that's the way I can summarise my very long feelings about that. How are we going to sort all this shit out? Not to romanticise either being very rich or very poor, but it made me think about how if you're rich, you often tend to have much more time to connect with friendships, and you have like extra rooms in your house and like social spaces in your private space that you can invite people into. And it's been well documented that if you are really, really struggling and really on the edge of financial buoyancy, you do form a lot of connections within your community, because the difference between doing that and not can be life and death. For me and lots of the majority of people in my country who are in the middle class, I think we run the risk of defaulting to very weak social ties and calling it a day, because the idea of scarcity, like, yes, we can feed ourselves, yes, we can clothe ourselves, but the luxury of having a house that nobody can chuck you out of is so expensive that we really feel like time is money, and spending too much time building social connections and investing in people can feel like a waste of time. horrible term, but definitely something that I've subconsciously acted on before. And there is a study by Jeffrey Hall in the University of Kansas that says it requires 200 hours of investment in spaces of a few months to make a stranger into a good friend. I don't know if that's true. Let me know in the comments below how many hours you think it takes to turn a stranger into a friend. I'd be fascinated. But I think we can all agree it does take time, and time is something that either accurately or inaccurately we really feel like we don't have. There's also a fisherman's friend study that found that it takes 34 hours of investment to shift from a more superficial acquaintance to a true friendship. So not from stranger to good friend, but just from superficial acquaintance. In addition, friendship requires 11 interactions to solidify, and each one should last about 3 hours. I actually think that sounds about right. The third thing that I've been thinking about is how our expectations are a total mess. Did you know that in the UK we have fewer best friends than any other country, on average 2.6? In Harper's Bazaar it talks about how it's weird that that is the number because it feels like we need to keep up with about 10 times that amount of people. That's the obligation, at least that I feel. In this book, it talks about 3 factors that are really important to Elizabeth Day in friendship, and I might take them on, actually. The 3 are stable, reciprocal, and attentive. And I think attentive is the one that is really hard to get behind and work out, like, what is attentive to you. I can imagine that there are as many styles of friendship as there are people on the planet, or at least like half the amount of people on the planet. A big revelation in my 30s has been that for me, friendship isn't only about compatibility, but it's also about capacity. Like, does this person have capacity for me? And do I have a capacity for them? Can I make room for what they might need and have the strength to not pursue it if I don't? Because often I'll just meet somebody who I'm really similar to, or who I really, really like or really admire, and I think we should be friends. And we could totally be some kind of friend, but to my utter despair, it would seem, after years and years of collecting data, I can't have 45 best friends, which is very annoying and makes me kind of want to join a cult, but also makes me think I should be thinking more carefully about Dunbar's work, who's the guy who researches how many people we can keep in our life, basically. You've probably heard of the number before, 150, as the amount of people we can actually compute in our brains to be around and know and recognise. But he also has other research around like layers of friends. So you have like 1.5 most intimate friendships or relationships, and then you have like a layer of 5, which are your shoulder to cry on friends, and then outside of that you have a layer of 15 people who are good friends and form your core social patterns. It goes on like that, and I really think that I'm going to take that forward in my life. A good friendship isn't built on just like similarities or clicking alone. It's actually built on time spent, activities done together, like actually turning up for the people in your life. My fourth thought is maybe it's okay. There's this part in Billy No Mates where he talks about up until 100 years ago, most societies agreed it was dangerously antisocial, even pathologically self-absorbed, to elevate marital affection and the nuclear family ties above commitments to neighbours, extended kin, civic duty and religion. In medieval times, for example, a marriage was a way of extending power or achieving peace. You would marry to create military alliances or be married off for the same purposes. If not for power, then marriage was an economic necessity. In agricultural societies, the spouses were workmates, struggling together to produce food, clothing and shelter to survive. It's only from around 1850, when the industrialisation and increased wealth meant that people could meet their marital needs without being married. That's when people began to marry for love. So if it goes partner, friendships, community, maybe our friendships aren't going very well because our relationships are going better than they ever have before. Maybe not in any individual way, but collectively, percentage-wise, at least some of us really care and connect and have a friendship with each other, which means that maybe we don't feel like we need as many friends as we used to, and maybe that gives us an opportunity instead to have some really close friendships, but also to spend more time with our spouses and also with the wider community. Now that falls flat when you think that not everybody is suited to having a spouse, not everybody wants one, not everyone has one. Some people have more than one. Maybe we can't have all 3 being strong at the same time. But there is also some sections in here that talk about how friendship isn't written into the social script or the financial script like relationships are, even though they can be as important, if not more important. And I definitely think the single person tax is a huge problem. The fact that the only way we're often able to afford to have basic things like housing is if we team up with somebody else and share a room with them. Luckily, some of us are in love with people that we're doing that with, but still, it would be nice for it to be optional and not a necessity. But suffice to say that all of this thinking about community and connection has made me feel like I have quite a lot of really close but geographically distant friendships. And between this and Cather Out's video, I'm thinking I should probably be investing more time in community and the people that are like physically very near me. And if friendships sprout from that, then amazing, but it's not a means to an end. Like, participating in my community and the wider group of people in my neighborhood isn't a failed project if I don't get friends out of it. In conclusion, I don't feel like you need to be somebody who feels like they're particularly struggling with friendship or has had a hard time in friendship to benefit from reading and thinking and learning more about the conditions of friendship. We spend so much time thinking about relationships, like work relationships, romantic relationships, and we spend so little time culturally on thinking about friendship. So I think we probably all have a friendship inspection deficit. I've really enjoyed reading these two books on the topic, and I'd love for you to tell me your favourites below. They gave me a lot of clarity about the friendships in my life that haven't worked or I feel like aren't working, but it also made me incredibly grateful for the really amazing ones that I already have. I love this passage from Billy No Mates that really like kind of sums up the feeling of friendship for me when it's done right. This familial bickering was strangely comforting, this hammock of mutual ease, the intimacy of not needing to do or be anything for a few hours, literally and spiritually in our pajamas. When you're cold in bed, putting on socks warms up your whole body. Those 4 inches of wool have a disproportionate impact. That's what those Sundays were. A sock pulled up over the extremities of the week to insulate the rest. And it made me think a lot about also how, like, a lot of the friendships, the good friendships that I really have come to me when I wasn't looking for them or expecting them. And in Billy No Mates, he quotes as well from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis argues that timidity and friendlessness go hand in hand. Those who simply want friends can never make any because friendship is a side effect of living, and it grows on you like a suntan when you are busy doing something else. And then he quotes from C.S. Lewis, the very condition of having friends is that we should want something else besides friends. Those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who are going nowhere can have no fellow travellers. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't got enough yet of me chatting about friendship, there's a video up here about it too. If you'd like to watch my video on leaving London and the impact of that, I think that links to this video, so you should watch that one too. Or if you've seen those already, or if you don't fancy them, there's 2 here that I think you might enjoy. This video is made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. I'm Lena Norms on all socials, so follow me there for more rambles. Frogsnog out.